Russian President Boris Yeltsin has accused the Congress of People's Deputies of trying to restore communist rule. His attack follows last week's Congress meeting, which last week refused to approve a referendum on whether Parliament or the President should have ultimate authority. Mr. Yeltsin's officials have suggested he might try to impose presidential rule, but it's not clear whether the army would support him. A Catholic man has been shot dead as he sat in a parked van in North Belfast. The shooting happened in Key Road in the Newton Abbey area, where it's thought the man was waiting to collect fish bait from the shores of Belfast Lough. Police said a car pulled alongside the van and the man, who was thought to be in his 50s, was shot at close range. The gunman escaped. The motive for the attack is not known and no organization has admitted responsibility. Scientists researching cancer of the breast and ovary have made an important advance towards detecting the gene which causes both diseases. Research published today shows that families with a history of breast or ovarian cancer have the same inherited genetic defect. It's hoped drugs may eventually be developed to correct the fault.
Okay.
Breast and ovarian cancer affect more than 30,000 women a year. No one knows what causes the vast majority of these cases, but in a small percentage of people, the diseases seem to run in the family. Now doctors have found that all those women have the same genetic defect, which makes them more vulnerable to cancer. The next stage is to identify the gene and find out why it causes the disease. Once the gene has been identified, a woman with a family history of cancer could be tested to see if she carries the gene. If so, she could be offered more intensive screening, or perhaps other preventive or prophylactic treatment.
She can choose to have prophylactic mastectomy and have her ovaries removed after she's had children. So she can virtually eliminate her personal risk, and again, of course, she can ensure that any further children she has don't carry the gene.
For people like Mrs. Barbara Garvey with a family history of cancer, the discovery is welcome.
Well, I'm very pleased because it gives me reassurance in the fact that I will be taken care of. People are keeping an eye on me, and they will also be keeping an eye on my daughter and her children if, unfortunately, I do happen to have the gene that passes it on.
Ultimately, it's hoped that drugs may be found which could counteract the effect of the defective gene, or gene therapy used to replace it. The discovery may also give new clues to what causes the cancers in those with no family history of the disease.
66,000 pupils have been barred from school for bad behavior in the last year, and the numbers are rising sharply according to the findings of a BBC survey. Many local authorities blame the rise on increased competition between schools. The study, carried out by Maury for tonight's edition of Panorama, is the biggest of its kind on the issue.
15-year-old Russell Bishop is one of a growing army of young people who've been permanently excluded or expelled from school. He's a talented sportsman and a member of England's junior ice hockey squad. But last year his plans were shattered when he was expelled from his school in Essex because of the length of his hair.
I'm very unhappy about it because he's in his final year at school. He had 6 months to go, and he hasn't been entered for any GCSEs. And where does he go from there?
The Maury survey for Panorama got responses from 3/4 of all local education authorities in England, Wales and Scotland. It found that the number of temporary and permanent exclusions has increased by 50% in the past 2 years. It's estimated that 66,000 pupils are excluded every year. That's 1 in every 100. Only 8% of authorities thought poor pupil discipline was the main cause for the increase. 42% blamed the climate of competition between schools.
We are increasingly in a dog-eat-dog situation, and that competitive and market economy is bound to lead to more and more heads saying, my prime responsibility is to my governors and to this school. That is what I'm paid for.
Schools which are high up the new exam league tables are likely to attract more pupils and so get a bigger budget. But that may also create an incentive to get rid of difficult or disruptive pupils. Baverstock School is one of the most popular in Birmingham, but since it opted out of local authority control 3 years ago, the number of pupils excluded has soared.
The reason why the other schools haven't expelled many children may well be the reason why they are undersubscribed and we are massively oversubscribed from our own area.
There are no statutory rules covering exclusions, but the Department for Education says it should be used sparingly and as a last resort.
Bosnian Serbs who've been laying siege to the eastern Bosnian town of Srebrenica say they're prepared to talk to the UN general who set up a command post there. General Philippe Morion has refused to leave Srebrenica until it receives food and medicine. The Serbs have said they wouldn't let relief convoys in until he moves out.
The condition of the besieged Muslims of eastern Bosnia is as bad as any known in this war. The refugees hoped to be evacuated and forced General Morion to stay when they found he couldn't get them out. But although at first held hostage by the starving, once the general said he would stay until their safety is guaranteed, the Muslim mood changed.
I'm here to stop these crimes against humanity. I'll stay as long as it takes to secure the people's safety.
Some Bosnian aid has reached Srebrenica by air. 2 helicopters last week dropped supplies and picked up wounded. But the Serbs are effectively stopping any aid arriving by road. They want to shell or starve the people out, and have used General Morion's presence as a further reason to refuse aid. But the Serbs have now agreed to negotiate with General Morion. His one-man mission may yet pay off.
I don't think General Morion is going outside his brief. His rather proactive, robust line which he's taking in Bosnia-Herzegovina is very typical of the new United Nations.
The role of UN forces has gone well beyond the initial mandate of escorting aid convoys. British troops who were themselves held hostage by Muslim refugees last week saw the effects of a Serbian bombardment on civilians. This morning, the town where they were held, Konjevic Polje, has fallen to the Serbs.
At least 100 people are now believed to have died in the storms which have hit the east coast of the United States. 33 people are missing after a freighter sank in high winds off Nova Scotia. Along the coast, millions of people are without power, and tens of thousands are stranded in emergency shelters after record snowfalls. In Florida, the storms are thought to have claimed more victims than Hurricane Andrew did last year. EC finance ministers meeting in Brussels today have been told that the recession in Europe is deepening faster than had previously been thought. The Chancellor, Norman Lamont, is hoping for an export-led recovery, but this will be harder to achieve as our main European markets suffer economic decline. From Brussels, Jonathan Charles reports.
An unusual protest outside the finance ministers' talks. A German truck suspended from a crane, part of a campaign against the lack of business opportunities in Europe's faltering economy. The ministers were bemused, but they know they're under attack for failing to halt the continent's deepening recession. They're struggling to come up with ways to boost growth, as Britain's junior Treasury Minister Sir John Cope acknowledges.
Quite difficult, but we shall make some progress.
Few of the EC ministers expect any sort of upturn now before next year. The worsening position on the continent is bad news for the Chancellor of the Exchequer as he finesses tomorrow's budget. Britain wants an export-led recovery, but with all the main markets shrinking, that will be more difficult. The Dusseldorf Trade Fair is a glossy shop window for British companies trying to break into Germany. With the pound now much cheaper against the Deutschmark, Britain's exporters are going to do well. Liz Forster, who's representing a London clothing manufacturer, isn't that optimistic though. With Germany sliding into recession, sales are harder.
Before, they just didn't think or sort of be as cautious as they are now when they're sort of, placing their orders. They're very much down, but nonetheless, because they're loyal, they still come back to you to order again.
Competition for sales is aggressive. Export orders could save jobs at home. Abru Henderson, a hardware equipment firm from Cornwall, are doing well. After 2 years in the market, they hope to avoid being squeezed by Germany's harsh recession.
DIY products in general are believed to be vulnerable over the next couple of years. In our particular position, we don't think that we're likely to suffer significantly.
But at fairs like this, the picture for British exporters is clearly mixed.
Those at the top end of the market, they will still be able to sell, particularly with the favourable exchange rate. Those at the lower to bottom end, they're going to find it much harder, particularly with competing products from the third world.
Exporting more could prove impossible. As economies collapse, so too could the demand for British goods. Jonathan Charles, BBC News, Brussels.